Um, I think it was this weekend that mentioned Assemblage Point, and there's lovely information about the oil on the website, but I want to know about the Assemblage Point, what it is, and could you speak to that a bit?
Well, so the assemblage point is tied to something in the shamanic tradition where you have all these pieces of stimuli that the body is processing, the emotions and the mind, and then the assemblage point would be how they all assemble, and then like your point of perception that you see the world through. And so part of part of having like expansion or like a realization is your ability to break out of that fixated perception to see other areas, because it's like looking through a microscope all the time. Like you see like lots of details, but you don't see everything else that's in the room. And so, like, being able to shift the assemblage point means that you are able to pull in different perceptions so that you can have an even bigger idea or bigger picture of what's going on in any given situation. So it goes back to even like earlier when I was talking about that dimensional thinking. That would be very similar. Like you're breaking out of your normal stream of thinking and processing. And so, in the shamanic traditions, they would even like locate, like there's this thing that comes out of the heart, and you look at like where it's at and try to shift it. But I never found that to be, super effective. Sometimes they would also do like a blow to the between the shoulder blades to shift it, and that works. But sometimes you have to get slapped really hard between the shoulder blades for it to work. There's a whole kind of group that does stuff with the assemblage point, and they use stones and things to try to manipulate it. But it's really, it's also like tied to how your mind works, and so even shifting into intuition, you're really shifting your assemblage point. And so just think of it as like the reason they call it assemblage point. It is like this point of perception that's assembled from all your sensory information, your past experiences, your body experiences, stimuli from the environment, your opinions, your thoughts, all these things kind of compile and assemble this point of perception. And so the idea would be that it's perceiving like in the aura, and it's like you can like shift it so that it perceives like these different spots on the aura, but that starts to get a little too technical. And so if you just look at it from the point of view of, shifting your perceptions where, like you're sitting there thinking about something, and then you have a realization of something like, oh, this is what they meant, or, oh, this is what's going on, or you see a bigger picture. That is literally your assemblage point is also moving or shifting. And so that's basically the idea of the assemblage point.
Thank you. So it's
Yeah.
intended to shift. It's not
Yeah.
like it isn't
The,
something that gets out of alignment. It's intended to shift.
Right. Well, the idea would be that if it was out of alignment, that's causing suffering, especially mental, emotional suffering. But the more fluid that it is, it's like your ability to shift and adapt, like adjust and adapt, is heightened. And so ideally, the assemblage point is fluid where it can shift to different things. But if you think about like this is like how like their explanation kind of, say you're doing work and you're grinding on a bunch of paperwork, and you've been alone for a while, and you're really in this place where you've been spending time alone, and you're working on your paperwork, and your mind is a particular way. And then you have to walk out and make a presentation to a handful of people, and all of a sudden you become outgoing, and you become very interactive, and you put out that information, and you shift from being kind of introverted and doing your work to being kind of extroverted and doing whatever you have to do. another way of saying that is you shifted your assemblage point. Like you shifted from being like focused and introverted into like, okay, it's showtime. I have to get out and interact. And so even if you're sitting there with friends and you're having conversation, and then you walk into the next room and your family's there and you start behaving a little different because that's your family, and you have different ways of interacting with your family. That would also be you having a fluid assemblage point so that you can shift into that way of acting or behaving.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier something about the heart. Um,
Mhm.
is there any connection between that and the heart seed?
No, like I used to think so, but over a period of time, it's just um it has more to do with like lower emotions and things. Like the more that the body's overwhelmed by homeostatic emotions, the assemblage point tends to go like point down. And when you're like in the clouds and not very practical, and everything's magical and everything, it tends to be more up and not just like kind of straight out. And so the idea is that if you shift the assemblage point, it will shift the thinking, and it will shift it for a little tiny bit, but then the person usually just pops right back.
Hmm.
And so it's almost like a point between like the heart and the outer part of your aura.
Hmm. Okay.
Like there's almost like this like kind of like tube or vessel that is between your heart and the aura.
And the front of the body?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much.